Thank you so much for joining me. I have Marie and Brent here to talk about Marie's journey through my program. She came to my program with chronic fatigue, and I just want to share her journey because it was really fun and exciting to watch her go from the beginning to going on her vacation where she was fully able to participate. So welcome. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks, Sue. Thanks. Thanks for having us.
Yeah. Marie, can we start out with what state you were in, what mindset you were in when you came into my program?
So I was at the point where I could walk about 1,000 steps a day, every other day, but that would cause me to crash for the evening. And the next day, I wouldn't be able to do anything. And then I would try again. I was pushing. And you're in the chronic fatigue journey, you're not supposed to push, you're supposed to just figure this out. And I felt like my body, if it was given the right things to do, I was at the time in my healing journey that if I found the right instructions and that there was a way out of this, I really
Hmm.
felt that I could figure that out. But I'd done a lot of work before that for the 2 years prior.
So
So
you felt like you saw some light at the end of the tunnel, glimmers of that.
I was getting more functional. My capacity had increased. So if I didn't try to do any exercise, my day was fine, just limited, doing very mild things at home and resting and really staying within my boundaries. I could have a decent day. But I could definitely would go outside my window of tolerance and then I would crash socially as well. So I was looking at various programs and books and I just felt there was something new because I had done another program. It really helped me, but I felt there was another thing out there.
What do you feel was missing from what you had done? Did you have a hint of what that would be, or looking back on it, do you have an idea of what that was that you recognized but maybe couldn't name at the time?
I felt I needed specifically to figure out how to walk. And I think I told you this a little while ago, that I'd almost thought maybe I shouldn't be walking. Like I had stopped walking off and on the year before because I couldn't, and it was just exhausting me. Then I thought maybe I should swim. Maybe I should just give up. Maybe I should go do yoga again. Maybe like I was just trying to figure out, I cannot figure out this walking. Someone needs to be able to tell me this because I couldn't figure it out. Because your brain capacity is limited
Yeah,
too.
yeah,
I'm
yeah,
a smart person, but
yeah,
I'm
yeah.
really intelligent, but
So
it's like, no.
you were a nurse, is that correct?
So I'm a retired nurse.
Retired
Yes.
nurse. And yeah, so you know that you have the capacity to process information, but in your state, were definitely diminished with brain fog and with the fatigue. And then you were at that time, did you have that trip booked already to Europe?
Yes. So it was supposed to happen in 2019, and we all know what happened to prevent
Mhm.
our kids.
I see.
Our kids couldn't go, and then so it was for Brent's retirement. So he had booked a trip to go to Italy with our kids and
Hmm.
their partners. Mhm. And I was dreading it in many ways because we'd been on trips the year before. And what would happen is I would cope and I would participate, but then I'd crash. And like I knew it was this whole push, crash, push, which I know isn't great, but that's what you do when you have to.
Mm.
Yeah, you were booking the trip. And in January, I said to him, if we go to the Vatican, because we had done it 10 years ago, I'm going to need to be in a wheelchair. And what was your response, Brent?
It was a matter of a lot of this is about managing logistics, and that was just going to be a major challenge in order
Mm.
to do that. So I think really that at that point the goal was, well, is there a way for you to be more functional? Um, because it very much was. She could do maybe 2,000 steps in a day, but that
Mhm.
was late in the day when she could come home and rest. You would never try to do that.
No, yeah,
Mhm.
Uh, yeah, so it became how are we going to do all of this? Because obviously, when you're in a major city, for instance, like Rome, you have to do a lot of walking.
Yeah.
There are taxi cabs, for instance.
Yeah, and no, and we had plans that we could do taxis and Uber to whatever if we had to, but um, that's not always possible. So it was really just a question of how do we manage.
Yeah, in some ways it seemed like you were wrapping your minds around maybe a future of disability that limited your active retirement. Yeah.
I had been toying with that a long time. Do I just give in and go and get a scooter and just, but I still wanted to walk. I'm still passively, and I understand as a nurse, I understand that there's a lot of people who have way more disability than I do and can't walk. I understand that. But for me, I felt I could figure this out. And if I gave into a scooter, then I'm what's possible for me.
I see. So you still have this commitment. I can figure this out. There's something I'm not giving up just yet. Even though how long had it been since since it first started?
It's been 6 years this August
Mhm.
that I got sick. It wasn't chronic fatigue. I started off with an off-gassing exposure to chemicals. And I had this crash for 6 months, but I slowly got better. And I was at, and then, I would have other exposures and I would have little setbacks. But the weird thing was I could never do cardio again. So I had been very active beforehand, could go do before I got sick, I could do a cardio class at the Y for an hour.
Mm.
Like I was in good shape. And then I just sat on the couch for that 6 months. But I gradually got better just on my own, just with physio and stuff like that. I was diagnosed with a respiratory thing and then up and down. And then I actually remember climbing in Sedona and thinking, this might be the last time I'm up on a mountain. I just had that sense this could be it. And so then 2 years ago, like I had been doing pretty well. And because that was probably in February. And then in the fall, I crashed again. Like there was things happened and then I crashed. And I was to the point where our son was home for Christmas and we were playing Yahtzee and I couldn't roll the dice. And I said to him, I want to play Yahtzee, but you're going to have to roll the dice for me. And that was very dark days. That Christmas, I said to Brent, maybe we have to tell the boys this is my last Christmas because I don't know. The tests all come back negative. They say my heart's fine. They say my lungs are fine.
Yeah.
And I had to say, but as a nurse, I'm like, how is this possible? Like when I see someone crash, like I just didn't understand what was going on.
So that's great that you had this kind of internal thing. Okay, I gotta figure out how to walk. That's what it is. That's what kind of pulled you through and got you to start to learn how to walk. And so there are some very specific moments, I think, when we were conversing back and forth, like you're like, what's happening? I feel this happening. What is it? But we'll talk about that later. But let's go into you. So you decided to join my program and you got immediate results and you got a lot of results. So can you talk about your first milestone?
I think like I got your book and I was reading it every day. I was doing the exercises, a new exercise for 6 days. So that was the end of February, like this year. And I could tell something is happening. And I think I listened to your talk on pain. And that really, the questions in there connected with other things I had learned. Like I was able to integrate other learnings and I was able to connect with what you were conveying. And then I think early on, I woke up and I didn't have brain fog for the first time in 6 years.
Yeah.
And I felt like I was in a ballroom. I had this image that I was in a ballroom and I could see forever. And I've never danced and I've never been a dancer. And it was just this vision that when I was awake, because it was like I could see, it was like I could see forever. It was just real good.
Yeah, I remember that because it happened so quickly. And a lot of it is connecting dots. Like your prior work definitely would set you up to have that level of success that you've had. And Brent, did you notice that when she started to have that brain fog clear up?
Yeah, it was very noticeable, like immediately. You could tell in the mornings, she would often be in a sort of a fog in the morning, and that sort of dissipated. You could see it in her eyes, like there was a clarity that hadn't been there for a long time.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's beautiful. What else did you go through? I remember, I think you were posting something like every day to me. This is happening. This is happening. It was so much fun. And then that first meeting we had, I think 3 weeks in or something, you're just giggling when you got on the line because you're like, what is happening? And so maybe you could share just a few of those other moments, or maybe a moment where you actually hit a speed bump and how you got around that.
As you said, there was every day. I actually have a log here because I was writing it down because I couldn't keep up and I wanted to know. I would connect here that I was struggling with was still my back pain, right? And I remember asking you about that at my first session. So yes, the brain fog cleared. Yes, these other things as I'm working slowly and every day it's changing, but I would still have this back pain. So around my T7, T8 area for 6 years. And I remember like you gave me a thing and that wasn't quite, I just wasn't getting there. But over time, that just gradually changed. And suddenly I am cutting up vegetables and I have no pain.
Now, was that the part? Because I think I do recall like you were, I think, on the computer and you said you had that pain, but when you went back to what you learned from that talk about the meaning of your pain, you started asking yourself these questions and that opened up something. Was that what cleared it up, or were there other things too? Was it the free your lungs thing?
So I think it's never one thing with chronic fatigue. It's not one way in and it's not one way out. So I think that was a big moment. I did ask that question of myself, what is holding me back? I think that was the question. And I had some release of like grief and sadness.
That's always a good sign, because I see that a lot where people go deep into some part of themselves that they've been absent from. And that is the very common emotion that they feel. It's grief, but it doesn't pull them under. It's grief that passes through them, but they get to feel it fully, and then it clears.
Yes. And I think your program, like the program I did before, helped me process emotions, but what the tools that you're giving allowed me to just go to the next level, to be able to just do it very easily without having to work at it. It just came and went. So it wasn't immediate after that. Like it still took a while and I did do the free your lungs and I was doing that. That literally there's 10 sessions. I did 9 sessions before we went to Europe. I was literally doing one session a day and sometimes repeating them. Maybe it was a little bit before the 9 days, but it was like, so that I think really opened up my thoracic area. And so it's just and you have to do the work, right? Like it's not a magic pill, but because I kept feeling so much better and I could tell every day there was improvements. And then suddenly, like, I don't even know when I realized, wait a minute, I just made soup and it didn't exhaust me. So I can garden for an hour. That's as far as I'm pushing myself at this point. I could probably go longer, but anyway, an hour, and I can pick up a shovel and carry it. And that was probably the first thing, like 2 years ago, I was carrying the shovel across the yard and I was exhausted. And I'm like, what is wrong with me? What is happening? Like, why can I not do this? This is before I crashed. And yeah, and without having to ask Brent to get this pot and this shovel and this, because I'm sure that's frustrating.
Yeah, I mean, it's when you're trying to be supportive and it becomes I was fortunate I was retired because right?
Yeah.
Driving her to appointments and dragging pots across the lawn and whatever it was.
Or on the stove.
Yeah, or even early on, it was just helping her like make her dinner because she has a sort of a separate diet. And then you could see before we left, she was doing the gardening. We had been to one of our provincial parks at the beach, and now instead of doing 1,000 or 2,000 steps, she was up to about 5,000 or 6,000. So it didn't happen overnight, but it was, you could see this gradual progress. And as Marie mentioned, this has just been from the end of February until June. Well, I say gradual, it's actually been, yeah,
Skyrocket.
like a rocket ship.
Yeah, compared to the 6 years.
Progress, exactly, yeah.
Yeah. She had some little glimmers of hope. If she had the right instruction, she could figure this out. What were you thinking from your side and from what you saw?
At one level, like so much of this is just baffling because it does go beyond the traditional medical model of understanding exactly what is wrong, right? Like it was easier to understand early on in her illness when it was exposure to off-gassing. It made more sense to me when the chronic fatigue aspects of it, which was about halfway through this journey, that part was just when she's laying on the couch and can't roll a dice, playing a game with her son. That didn't make any sense. And yet she'd had like it went from some days were better and some days were worse. And then once she started your program, it was like you could just see the immediate improvements, both mentally, in terms of brain fog, in terms of her energy, but also in terms of her outlook. Right? There became this greater sense of hope, and a greater confidence that this was actually possible. Because after a couple of years of I can only walk 2,000 steps a day, then within a month and a half or so,
Less than 2 months.
Less than 2 months, all of a sudden she can do 7,000 steps in a day without totally crashing. And that was always the other thing. She could do these moments where she could do beyond the 2,000 steps, but the entire next day would be a write-off. Now it really became a situation where she could do these things, and we'd come home from the beach, for instance, and she wasn't completely wiped out, and the next day would be normal. So that was major shift.
So I do hear like one of the things about chronic fatigue is like you don't get restorative sleep. Has that changed for you?
So sleep has been a big journey. And so, yes, absolutely. Because I remember early on asking you a question, do you have any suggestions about how to sleep and where to sleep and whatever? Because you have so many good answers, I figure you can answer everything. But yes, my sleep has improved. And yes, it has.
Yeah.
I could always sleep. My problem was it was waking up is the problem.
Oh, I see. I see.
It was like I was going back into, my nervous system was shutting down when I would go to sleep, and it was hard to wake it up.
Oh, I see.
And you were asking about the milestone, and when Brent was talking about the beach, I remember, or at the provincial park, I remember going on this walk, and it was further than I had anticipated. And I think I shared this with you, Sue. Like I felt my chronic fatigue coming back, and I was like, I don't know how I'm going to get back to the car because now we're here, and how are we going to get back? And I cued myself to do your 3 keys, right? Like where's my head? And it's, my head is not where it's supposed to be. Because I remember thinking, Brett, it's not good. I don't know how you're going to get back. And then I did that. I put my head in the right spot and I could walk again. And you noticed right away.
Yeah, it was almost an immediate improvement. You could see her getting tireder and tireder. And then she did these adjustments. And then within 10 minutes or so, she was like, oh no, I can go on. And honestly, as an outsider to this, even though I'm you just look at this and go, okay, I have no idea. Like it goes beyond my ability to.
What just happened there? Well, I mean, so I can explain the head is big and heavy. And so when it's going forward, there's a lot of strain on the system because the system is not built for you to be hanging like that. The system is actually built to support the weight that's pressing on it. They're pressure receptors. They're pressure receptors at the base of your head, which is one of the keys. They're pressure receptors in the feet and ankles, another one of the keys. And so the idea behind this whole thing is to reactivate, reconnect the body as it knows itself. So I think there was a key point for you, Marie, where you were telling me that the tummy time stuff was really helpful. So I started to that a little bit more to see how can we build that up, because you also were mentioning how you can feel your multifidus your turn on. That was really cool because you were aware of that on a very clear level. And so I was pointing out how you could do that more. And we went more into that to really plug in what I would refer to as the tonic system. That's one of my teachers talks about tonic function, which is the deepest layers of connection. So ligaments, but also the slow twitch muscles that are running all day long, and just the fascial connections and the natural diaphragmatic organization in the center line. So if you are working with those together, it feeds the pull of gravity down on your bones back up through the diaphragm. And so it's a recycling system. And when you learn how to use that recycling system, you witness that when she put her head in the right place and she activated those muscles the way they know how to work. So you're just starts with maybe some sort of exposure or virus or something that puts your body in a depleted state. And then there might be, you add in a little bit of like emotional thing to it or some other stressor, because when you don't have bandwidth and then you push yourself finally like over some edge, right? Maybe there's a disconnect. So that autonomic system just doesn't work the way it is meant to work because it doesn't have all the signals coming in. It doesn't have the pressure signals. So the muscles don't turn on to support the spine, and in particular, the head at the top of the spine, the way it's evolutionarily been trained to do. So what's happening at the speed that it was happening to her comes from millions of years of evolution, but we're not trained to consciously learn how to carry ourselves that way. And that is basically what we're trying to do to really get down, not to get into exercise muscles or contrived movements to make a muscle bulk up, but to really find all of those connections, to focus on the connectivity so that you feel that within your own system and you know how to get there. You know what places to focus on. And there's also a timing and coordination piece with that. But it's a beautifully powerful system that has a lot of redundant ways to organize your body. And when it seems like when you're at the chronic fatigue level, you're at the last alternative. And then that one has shut down. And so now you can't even animate your body. And so when you learn to reanimate your body from the inside, from that very deep core system, you are rebuilding yourself.
And when you explained that to me, that made total sense. And then also I was experiencing it, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And that's the thing. Like when you're experiencing something and you understand it at the same time, then yeah, of course, you're going to go back to it. But if you experience something and it feels like magic, that you don't know your way back to it. You don't know what just happened. You don't know how to recreate it. You don't have ownership of it.
And I had learned about tonic and basic muscles in nursing school, but it was totally irrelevant. It was just an abstract thought.
Yeah.
Well, I was experiencing it. Oh, yeah, that's why I have pain in my rhomboids, is because they're doing the work that they shouldn't be doing all the time. Right. And so when I was going to physiotherapy before, I would feel good for a day and then I would go back into those same patterns. And then I would need to go back in a week because my pain was bad, because I wasn't changing the pattern. The global pattern wasn't changing.
Yeah, and the global pattern is not the global muscular pattern, because when I talk about animating the body, it's the global desire or purpose for which you reach or for which you pull in and protect. It's these animated gestures that move your body, and those gestures come from some internal desire to connect, to learn, to reach towards and move towards, to nurture, or to pull back, to protect, to defend, to retreat, to disconnect. All those, it's just either you're going towards it or away from it. What are you doing? If you do it though, go with all of yourself or pull all of yourself, because if you're half there and half there, then that's also a fragmentation, and it shows up it shows up in pain in your neck or pain in your back or whatever, because you're not living in this internal system that is highly refined and very powerful.
And that's one thing I appreciate about your work, Sue, and your philosophy is you realize that this is the real technology, the human body. Like that, I get frustrated when people are, and we're chasing all this AI and computers and robots, and they think that's technology. And then I have what I've experienced within your own body. And as a nurse, what I saw, we are the actual technology that we've taken for granted.
Wow, that's so good. Yeah.
And you see that and you're reconnecting that, right?
Yeah.
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 Because we've disconnected ourselves from our body.
Disconnection. Yeah, that's the thing. And we do it for multiple different reasons. And most of the time it's emotional. But if there's a layer on top of that, like a chemical hit or viral hit, and already start with a depleted or narrowed bandwidth, and then things go south. And but there always is that element of purpose, meaning. That's why that written part will reveal more interesting stuff to you still.
Yes, because I haven't dived into that because I've been so focused on can I walk in Europe?
Yeah, no, and I told you when you said that you were worried about that, I said that's a great goal. That is an absolute great goal.
And when you said that, I thought, oh, but am I really going to be able to get there? And then we went to the Pinery Provincial Park about 2 weeks before we went to Europe. And I thought, oh, okay. And I felt like I was training for a marathon, but also resting. Like I was, it was like, okay, I can't push too hard, but I have to let this flow and I can't overthink it, but I need to keep.
Yeah, it's a fine line to walk, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So then, yeah, indeed, I got to Europe and we went through the Vatican and I did not need a wheelchair.
That's awesome. That's so great.
And it wasn't just that. It was like the day before we did a tour of the Colosseum and a forum. And I asked our eldest son, how many steps have we done today? And it was 28,000.
28?
28,000.
Oh
Yeah.
my God.
And that's the day before we go to the Vatican.
Oh,
It was 28.
He didn't tell me that.
Yeah,
I didn't know
it was
that.
28,000 the one day. And the next day was 15,000, I think the day we went.
And that's when I thought, because the guide, we had a private tour guide, and he said, do you think we can do this? And Brent said later, remember, what is Max thinking? Because we told him 2 months ago she'll need a wheelchair.
In February, when we arranged the tour, we were like, oh, we may need a wheelchair at the Vatican. And so forth.
And she'll take a break after the Colosseum.
She might just go to the Colosseum and not go necessarily to the forum and so forth. And then we get there and she's perfectly fine. We were averaging in the days in Rome, probably first day we didn't do so much because you get
well, yes, I still needed to rest.
You need to rest.
Yeah. And the travel exhausted me. It's not like I still wasn't having challenge.
Right. But we were able to plan it so that she built up her step. But I think the second day you did about 12,000 steps. And then it was 28,000 steps and 15,000 steps the next day.
Yeah, and it's slow.
Which is compared to 4 months previous, it was 2,000 steps. And she'd be exhausted for the day after.
Yeah.
So now there were times where you were walking faster than I was. Yeah. I had a blister on my foot and I'm trailing behind and thinking, who in the world would have imagined people not trailing behind? Well, because you were going at a good pace too, right? It wasn't.
I still am walking. I still wasn't walking, pushing myself, right? It was a walking pace, right? And then you stop. And then, because I have found since I returned, like my day, like suddenly you're doing more housework and more other things, which also takes things. And then when I go for a walk, it's more cardio. So then I realized I was going too far. My body still hasn't experienced this for a long time. So let's let her catch up and give her a break.
Oh, good. Would you say you push yourself like before you had the chronic fatigue? Were you someone who pushed yourself like over your limits?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
I needed, so before I got sick, I ended up with compassion fatigue. And I worked with a psychologist and stuff who introduced me to self-compassion and all this stuff. Because those were new concepts to me.
I love hearing you saying that. I haven't been doing this so long. Let's give myself a little break.
And so with the morning, so basically what we did in Europe was I would get up and then I would go back to the room. I would rest. I would do your work just from memory, just whatever my body needed. I didn't pull out the computer. I was doing it on patios overlooking the streetscape. And yeah, and it was then I would rest and then I could go out in the afternoon and then I would have a full day. And then the trains were still overwhelming for me. I got a little dizzy sometimes. So then I would have to take a day or that evening and just rest. But it was like I was still dreading going, right? Like when we pulled up to the airport in Toronto, I thought, oh, what is this? What am I going to do? How, like, it might break, because other times when we pulled up to the airport, it's like this huge, massive airport. How am I going to get around? Do I need a wheelchair and all that? That's still lurking in the back of my head.
Yeah.
And then by the time we come home, I'm like, that's not who I am anymore. Yeah.
Because, yeah, you have the doubts and then the experience of years of not knowing if you could do something. That must be so scary. But
And I remember at the winery, they also had an olive grove. So I was doing your exercises in the olive grove, looking over the Tuscan hills. Like, it was so beautiful, right? Like, it was just such a beautiful, I'll always remember that, doing your exercise.
oh, that's wonderful.
It
So exciting.
It was a balance. And I think, so the program that list of exercises you gave me in the last couple of weeks, I've been doing that every morning. That's the one you sent me after. And that, I think, is really helping with my vision, because I can tell at night the TV, it's easier to watch. And my brain was still having a hard time with screens, but I've noticed that's improved. It's just so much has improved. So much has improved. So
It's so great to understand the whole context of it, how it impacts your future and how you see a life moving forward, especially as you enter retirement. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
it's been life-changing, Sue. Like, literally, you gave me my life back. I had to work, but you showed the way, right? So I think we both appreciate that.
Absolutely.
Yeah. You questioned about the value of investing in another thing, but
Yeah, because you get to a point, with the various journey that she's with the various things that have been part of her journey. You keep wondering, okay, when is this going to end? But it's just will work now, right? But I have to say, it's just been like truly transformative.